So I want to talk about the toxicity of oil-based paint for artists, and there's a lot of confusion about this topic, and so I thought I'd just kind of break it down and talk about the areas of concern and sort of the do's and don'ts regarding toxicity and the use of oil paint. So what I've done here is I've painted these 6 squares onto this canvas here, and every one of those squares is white oil-based paint, and there's a huge difference in the toxicity in each one of these and how they vary from one to another. But let's start in the top left here, and this is Rust-Oleum-based paint. It's a titanium white pigment, but it's paint that you would buy at a hardware store, and it dries in about 4 hours at room temperature, or even faster. The next one here is alkyd fast-drying oil color mixed with liquid. And the reason I have it mixed with liquid is because most artist paint comes in tubes, almost all of it, and it's very stiff, and if you try to brush it out on a canvas, it doesn't spread well, doesn't have a lot of flow to it, it's missing a lot of qualities that you want, handling properties, etc. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't paint with paint straight out of the tube, and there are artists that do, but there's a lot of things to consider, but that's for another video. So typically an artist would take tube paint and thin it down with a medium, and then that medium's going to have its own toxicity issues, and then the paint is a separate issue. So in other words, alkyd fast drying oil color and this paint in particular, just by itself, even without the medium in it, already is very smelly and has fumes in it, and there's warnings all over the back of the tube, as you can see, that warn you about using it with adequate ventilation and a lot of other things. So that is not typical oil-based paint. This alkyd fast-drying paint, which has dryers in it, and it dries in less than 24 hours on the canvas. So it's a fast-drying artist paint, and even without solvent in it, even if you don't thin it down with liquid like I have here, it already has fumes in it, and you have to use it with very good ventilation, and just follow the instructions on the back of the tube, and you can see that you need to use ventilation when you use this paint, even without medium in it. Now let's go to the next one here on the right, top right. Now this is flake white, which this is the only one of these squares that's actually made with a pigment other than titanium. And flake white, the pigment itself has some toxicity, but it's only a toxicity for consumption. So if you paint a big painting with lead-based paint, there's no fumes that get into the air that you have to worry about at all. The only thing you would have to worry about is consuming it. You don't want to get it on your skin for a lot of reasons. It could be absorbed, depending on, if you rub it on your lips or whatever. But primarily it's a consumption issue with the pigment itself. Then above and beyond that, because this flake white is just simple artist oil color, it's not alkyd, it doesn't have dryers specifically, that are going to really accelerate the drying time. But flake white will, with liquid, which is a fast-drying medium, here will dry in less than 24 hours. But that's primarily part of the medium that's speeding up and accelerating that drying. Flake white, unlike titanium white, and by the way, flake white is just lead paint. It's just lead white. Flake white dries faster than titanium does, just on its own. Titanium is a non-reactive pigment. You put it into the oil, and it just sits there, and it takes a long time to dry, just depending on the type of oil that it's mixed with, you can add other additives to it, other powders other than just the white, which can also accelerate the drying to some degree. Now let's go down here to the bottom left corner, and here we find artist oil color titanium white, and this square was painted, it had been mixed with liquid, which is an artist medium, and I've painted this square. But now let's just talk about the paint without the liquid in it. Let's say you didn't thin it with the medium, and you just squirted it out on a palette. Well, in that case, because this is just regular old oil paint, it doesn't have all these, accelerator dryers in it, then that paint, because it's just regular old oil paint, there's no fumes that are being put into the room. It's only when you bring the medium into it that you start to have fumes and you have to deal with ventilation. And so the liquid itself, if you read the back of the label, it's got all kinds of warnings about making sure you use it with adequate ventilation. It has solvents in it. I don't know exactly what the ingredients are, but certainly the warnings will tell you. And even if you smell it, you can just smell the toxicity almost in the liquid, and in also a lot of other mediums, or even the alkyd fast-drying paint by itself. You can just smell it, and it has a strong odor that at least to me and to anybody that I've asked, smells very chemically, smells very, pungent or whatever it is. But point is, going back to this artist oil color, if the regular old oil paint does not have fumes, it's not until you bring in the medium that you have the fumes, okay? Now, let's go to the next one. Traditionally prepared titanium white oil color mixed with a traditional medium. And this is sort of a hand-ground pigment mixed into oil. And if you've seen some of my other videos where I talk about this, oil paint is nothing more. The simple oil paint in the tube, traditional, can be nothing more than just pigment with just a vegetable oil, drying oil in it. And that can be linseed oil, poppy seed oil, safflower oil, but we use linseed oil in Geneva paint because it forms the strongest paint films. And also it dries a little faster than the safflower or the poppy seed oil. And that's a natural drying, so we like that. But let's get back to this square here. Traditionally prepared titanium white oil color. Certainly, if the pigment is a non-toxic pigment, and there are plenty of toxic pigments out there, but most of them are not in common use anymore, but you still have to be careful. So this titanium white pigment is a non-toxic pigment if you've prepared it in the traditional way where you've ground it by hand on glass, and you will end up with a thick paste, a very stiff paste that has no fumes to it at all. It's not harmful to get it on your skin. There's nothing, in fact, I'm not going to advise that you eat it, but there's nothing toxic in it even for consumption. Just as traditional handmade paint. I can't speak for the major manufacturers, regular old titanium white. I don't know what additional additives they put into it other than titanium. But traditional oil-based paint, just powder, non-toxic powder mixed with vegetable oil, produces a non-toxic pigment paint that you have nothing to worry about, no toxicity. Now, if you make it with a toxic pigment, then you have a consumption issue that you've got to deal with. If you mix a medium into it, it's going to be the medium, the toxicity in the medium as far as fumes go that you have to worry about. So there's a whole, thousands of recipes out there for artist medium. And all of these recipes, as far as I know, have a solvent in it. This is for traditional oil paint. And the reason you put a solvent in it is because the solvent, like mineral spirits or the old-fashioned turpentine, those things thin the paint down, and then they evaporate out of the paint film, leaving you with a nice, strong paint film that's got all the structure in it that it needs. So I don't want to get too technical there, but my point being is that traditional mediums run the gamut from some that are very smelly and very toxic. For instance, if they're made with old school turpentine, which artists used to use, 50 years ago, almost, it was very, very, very common. Turpentine, if that's what you've made your traditional medium with, then the turpentine itself is very toxic, and you absolutely should use ventilation with it. Odorless mineral spirits like Gamsol, made by Gamblin, is fantastic. It's far better than old school turpentine in terms of toxicity and toxins that are in the air. So if you use a medium, the best thing you can do is make it with something like Gamsol, an artist grade odorless mineral spirit that has far less toxins than just regular old mineral spirits that you'd buy at a hardware store. And that's primarily why they make it that way, is to lower the toxins as much as they can. So I highly recommend traditional mediums, like I have one on my supply list. It's a slow drying medium, and you can go read the recipe. It's got Gamsol in it, or an odorless mineral spirit in it. But even then, you need to use ventilation, because it's got the mineral spirits in it. You don't want to be in a closed room breathing that all day long. It's just, I don't even want to get into all the problems, but it really is just not something you want to do. Now, this last square in the bottom right, this is the Geneva titanium white oil color. It's the paint that I make myself, but there's no solvent in it whatsoever. So in the case of the Geneva paints, you can use them in a room without ventilation. There's no toxic smells to it, so long as you're not allergic to oil of cloves, which is in it. Oil of cloves is something that they sell in health food stores and use it for aromatherapy. So it's not like a solvent like mineral spirits. It doesn't have that toxicity in it. So the Geneva paint, all the colors that we sell, you can actually use without any ventilation, and they're perfectly safe. Now, as far as pigments go, there are some pigments out there, and the number one pigment that's still used today are the cadmiums, the cadmium yellows, the cadmium reds. And the reason those are still sold, even though cadmium has a reputation for toxicity, and in fact it is toxic, if you paint cadmium yellow on a canvas and then you let it dry and then you sand it with fine sandpaper, and you get dust in the air and you breathe that air into your lungs along with the cadmium particles that are floating around, then that is very, very much something you don't want to do. You don't want to use it in a spray gun and spray it in the air so that there's a mist of cadmium paint in the air. But as far as the fumes go, there's nothing about cadmium that puts off fumes. As long as it's in oil paint, it doesn't have the toxicity in the air. You don't have to worry about breathing it. Just don't sand it and don't spray it. But furthermore, the cadmiums that the artist paints are made with, and this, as far as I know, this goes for all the major manufacturers. Certainly at Geneva we sell a cadmium yellow, and the cadmium pigment that we use and all the other major manufacturers use for artist paint, as far as I know, is a type of cadmium that's different, very different than the cadmium that they use in batteries, and that has other toxic properties as far as consumption goes, for instance. But the cadmium that is used in artist paints is a different type of cadmium. It's not absorbed through the body. If it's ingested, it just gets passed through and you don't absorb it. So it's not at all saying that you should eat it, and if you do eat it, you should contact poison control or whatever. But it's a whole different thing, and that's the reason they use this type of cadmium in artist paint, is because it's far safer as far as consumption if you happen to consume some of it. So I hope that answers some of the general questions about toxicity, but I want to get into the last thing, and this is really, and again, what I'm trying to do is, there's a lot of people that just blanket across the board think that oil-based paint is harmful to breathe, and it really just depends on all these variables. And so, you can paint with oil-based paint and have no problems with fumes if you're not using a solvent, or you're not, as I said, doing all the other things, sanding cadmium paint and breathing the dust. So you can use oil-based paint very safely. And you can even use it without ventilation in some situations, like if you're using Geneva paint or whatever. But the real problem with toxicity comes, or I shouldn't say the real problem, because if you're using old school turpentine and you're not using ventilation, that's certainly a huge problem. But the real problem in terms of, in my world and where in the people that I teach, is when you stain a canvas or when you varnish a canvas. Those are two things that are very smelly and produce all kinds of fumes. When you varnish a painting, I mean, you just smell up the room instantly. It's a ton of surface area. There's all kinds of solvents in the various varnishes that are out there. So I do that outside in an open garage or in a room like my studio that has really good ventilation. This is the ventilation that I have in my studio. As you can see, it really sucks the air out of this room, and so we get the air moving from one end of the room, one corner of the room, and it literally just moves and then goes out to ventilation. So it's all being taken out of here at one time, and a lot of thought was put into setting up that ventilation system. But don't just go into a room and think, that you can stand it for a day, because over time, it's over time that these toxins can cause problems, and brain damage and all the rest. Now, the other thing that I do is I stain my canvases, and the way I stain my canvases is I use a very fast-drying paint, even an alkyd paint, titanium white with burn umber, and then I put a whole bunch of mineral spirits in it because I like to thin it down real thin. And you don't want your foundation to be real oily. You certainly wouldn't want to paint a foundation with the Geneva paints. So you want a very low oil percentage paint, and I don't want to get into technical stuff, but you've got to use a lot of solvents in it instead of oil. The solvents will evaporate out. And so therefore, when you stain a canvas, just like when you varnish a canvas, do it outside, do it in an open garage, or in a studio that's got really good ventilation. So that's pretty much it as far as toxins go and handling oil-based paints. Read your labels, and use adequate ventilation, or use a paint like Geneva that doesn't have the fumes in it. There's one other thing, and that's oil-based paint, water-based, where you can use water as the solvent in oil paint. And the issue with that is just, it's fine, but there are other dryers that they put in those paints, and some of them have some smells, different brands. But also, my main problem, and this is very much a personal thing, but I like my paint to stay wet and to have flow to it, and water actually evaporates out very quickly, so that if you mix up some paint with some water in it as the medium, and you can't use water in all oil paints, but there are water-based oil paints, water mixable oils that you can do that with, but the water evaporates out so quickly that you mix up some paint and you come back a couple hours later and it's already gotten stiff, and so the handling issues are there. But so that's about it for all the toxins, and it's all I can think of for now. There's certainly a lot more you can delve into it, but that's kind of the basics. If you go to drawmixpaint.com, you can find links to all my free videos. If you go to genevafineart.com, you can find out all about the paint that I use to paint with, that I manufacture myself right here in Austin, Texas. And thank you so much for watching.